continuing our conversation about ways that you would specifically collect data and information from students about their experiences in schools or classrooms, we are going to talk today about a Kiva panel. So I'm going to tell you the steps for it, some tips and best practices. Let's get right to it. School Reform Initiative, or SRI, I'm sure you've seen a ton of these protocols. So this is Kiva protocol. And effectively, the process is you have a big group, multiple stakeholders, you put them into small groups, right? Approximately 8 people at each table, for example. You have volunteers sit at the front of the room. So again, this recommends about 4 to 6. A question is posed to the panel. They have 1 minute to think before they're asked to speak, which I think is a very important thing. And then each person is allowed 1 minute to respond orally. What the audience is doing at this point is they are writing a phrase on a Post-it that captured their attention. Okay, then after everyone's done, the panel is offered an additional minute to respond again. Presenters return to the small groups, and then each person in the small group is just going to share their recorded word or phrase. They will have a group discussion after everyone shares, and then each participant writes a possible answer to the focus question from what they've learned through the group discussion and the panel discussion. After this, you kind of repeat. So a new panel is chosen with different participants. You repeat it with a new question a couple more times, right? There's some possible Kiva questions here. I really like the 3 that Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan shared in their book, Street Data. So share a bright spot in your experience of our district or our school. What can we learn from that? Reflect on an experience of inequity or exclusion. How did it impact you? And then imagine you could wave a magic wand. So now we're getting to really, how do we solve it? What's the action step? What would you change and why? And I love that they specifically embed the goal in here too, right? We're going to change things, but we're going to change things specifically to strengthen equity relationships and deep learning, right? So whatever your goal is, I think you could just take that one. That's a beautiful one. I also love, and I made a note here, that Street Data shares this beautiful story, right, of a district who really had a massive cultural shift from where they went from looking at dashboard data, which is kind of divorced from the student experience lens or participant experience lens, to listening to a panel. And this is a quote from the book. When people started sharing their stories, everyone listened, not with an ear of who's to blame or need to defend and justify, but really trying to understand the experience of each participant. And then with the dashboard data, you always feel like you need to justify, defend, or blame. So there's a real difference, a shift in just the cultural dynamic of the community when you use Kiva panels instead of just divorce data from the humanity of the people. This is also from Shane Safir. I love this. This is an example of what you could do to alert people, invite people, and tell them what to expect when you're sending out invitations for a Kiva panel. So, here's where it is. These are the 4 questions we're going to discuss. This is she talks about educational equity being kind of the frame, and then she literally shares the questions, right? So she's like, you can jot down in advance any thoughts. Here they are. And she shares the 5 questions with some space here, but that she specifically is saying, I'm going to give you a heads up. You have plenty of time to think about this. It's not just going to be kind of thrown at you and the moment of you have to come up with this beautiful answer. Like, there is time, and here's exactly what we're about. And those are your Kiva panels. I think you can do this really big, invite stakeholders, community members, parents, caretakers, siblings, like whoever is involved in the wider community of the educational community that you work in. Or it could be, okay, we have a staff meeting and we're going to invite some students who are after school right now and we're just going to listen. So I think it can be any sort of degree of complexity, largeness, whatever. I think you could also just do this in a classroom if you're the teacher, like we're doing Kiva panels today, right? And so you're pulling from the diversity of ideas within your class population. So I think there's a lot of ways to personalize this to your need. And I think the goal is not for perfection and ideally it's as inclusive as it can possibly be with all your stakeholders. But I think that the deeper goal is we're listening to whoever is willing to share with us. So if you have structures in place that this just fits into, do that as often as you can.